Hello friends, we have been concerned with the dislocation as a line defect owing to its influence on the plastic deformation of the material. In the previous lecture, we saw the strain energy that is introduced by a dislocation. If you could recollect, the strain energy introduced by a dislocation is proportional to the square of the magnitude of the Burgers vector. So that means whenever a dislocation takes up a path wherein the Burgers vector increases, that means the overall energy introduced by the dislocation during its propagation also correspondingly increases. So therefore, the propagation of the dislocation must be along a path wherein the change in the energy or change in the strain energy introduced by this dislocation is minimal. So when you consider such a path, then the dislocation will have to choose a particular slip plane and a particular slip direction. So the slip plane. So the dislocation, in order to ensure that the energy change or the strain energy introduced into the system due to its propagation is minimal, it has to choose a particular path, and this path is on a particular plane and along a particular direction. Now given that the strain energy introduced is proportional to the Burgers vector, and in most cases the Burgers vector is nothing but the interatomic distance. So if you consider the lattice translation vector, so dislocation wherein the Burgers vector are the lattice translation vectors. So in those cases, the magnitude of the Burgers vector is equal to the interatomic distance. So therefore, the propagation of the dislocation should be along a particular direction in a particular plane wherein the interatomic distance is the shortest. So correspondingly, we can by knowing in which crystal structure the dislocation is going to propagate, we can say these are the preferred direction and planes in which the dislocation can move wherein or by ensuring that the change in the strain energy is minimal. So given a crystal system or a crystal structure and introducing this criteria, that is the dislocation wants to ensure that there is a minimal introduction in the strain energy during its propagation, and the Burgers vector given since it is equal in most cases to the interatomic distance. So given a crystal structure, we will be able to say which would be the energetically preferred path for the propagation of the dislocation. So this energetically preferred path, particularly if we focus on the plane in which the dislocation would propagate, would be the plane wherein you have highest density of atoms, and secondly the direction in which the dislocation would propagate, it would be the shortest lattice. So this direction will have the shortest lattice translation vector. So given that the propagation of the dislocation should ensure the minimal introduction of the strain energy, this dislocation will choose a specific direction and a specific plane, and this is based on the criteria that the direction should have shortest lattice translation vector, or to put it simply, the interatomic distance in that direction should be the minimal one or the shortest one. So this combination of the plane and direction that dictates the path of the dislocation, we refer to that as the slip system. So if you could recollect, it is the movement of the dislocation that ultimately renders the plastic deformation of a material through slip. And this movement of the dislocation is governed by a specific plane and a specific direction, because the energy introduced into the system by the propagation of the dislocation should be minimal, and therefore this combination of plane and direction that dictates the path of the dislocation moment, we refer to it as the slip system. Now, based on this understanding, we want to see we ended the previous lecture by considering what amount of stress or what amount of load is required for the dislocation to propagate in this particular slip system. So far what we have seen for the propagation of a dislocation, there should be a designated path which is a specific combination of plane and direction. Now we want to see how much of a stress is required. So how much of a mechanical condition we need to impose in order to allow the dislocation to move in that particular path, in that particular slip plane. So for that, we began by considering a conventional three-dimensional sample, something that is of a shape of a cylinder. And given that the slip plane in this cylinder depends on the crystal structure. So the slip plane in this cylinder, it depends on the crystal structure. We cannot expect the slip plane to be perpendicular to the loading direction. If we assume this is the loading direction and we are imposing a load P, and since the slip plane which we are interested in, because our ultimate focus is we want to consider how much of a stress that is required for the propagation of the dislocation. So the dislocation, it moves along a particular slip plane and the slip plane is dependent on the crystal structure. We cannot expect the slip plane to be perpendicular to the loading direction as it is. And therefore, and even if you could recollect our earlier lectures, we always began, for the generalized case, we considered a plane that is inclined, because from the expressions that we get from the inclined plane, you can arrive at any planes that is even normal to that of the loading direction. So to get a generalized set of expression for the components of stress, we consider the inclined plane. So that is one additional reason why we have to consider an inclined plane for this discussion as well. So we have an inclined plane in this three-dimensional system, where we have the propagation of the dislocations. Therefore, this inclined plane is not any plane, it is the slip plane. Now in this plane, we have a specific direction where the dislocation can propagate in an energetically favorable manner. So in this direction that is shown in red, if the dislocation propagates in this direction, then this propagation is energetically favored because the strain energy introduced when the dislocation propagates in this direction of the slip plane, it is minimal. So what we now have is the direction of the loading, we have a slip plane and a slip direction. So the red one marks the slip direction. Now let us characterize both the slip plane and the slip direction. Let us see how we can characterize the slip plane within the three-dimensional system that we have considered. So if you could recollect, we do that by considering or by introducing a normal to that of the inclined plane, that is the slip plane here. So this normal, it makes an angle theta with the loading direction. So in this way, by projecting or by introducing a normal and calculating the angle that the normal makes with the loading direction, we characterize the slip plane. Now similarly, we can characterize the slip direction by talking about or considering the angle the normal makes with the slip direction in that plane. So let us assume that to be lambda. Now let us also assume that the cross-sectional area of this sample, that is perpendicular to that of the loading direction, is A. Now we are imposing a load of P, and the stress that is associated with that load is P by A. Now we want to consider the stress that is required for, or the mechanical condition that is required for the propagation of the dislocation. So we want to focus on the stress or that is acting along the loading direction. So we can project that stress onto the loading direction and we can calculate the stress that is required or stress that is acting along the slip plane and the slip direction. So the stress that is available for the dislocation to move. So for that, now we have an expression for the overall stress that is being imposed on the material. Now if we want to calculate the stress that is imposed on the slip plane, then we have to consider the inclination angle. If you could recollect this understanding of considering or calculating the stress acting on an inclined plane, we began with the consideration of a two-dimensional setup with an inclined plane, and this inclined plane will subscribe an angle theta with the normal, and the area of this inclined plane we project it onto the normal, and we say it as, calculate that as, so this area here of the inclined plane will be, we calculate it by considering the cos theta. So if you consider the cos theta, it would be the adjacent by hypotenuse, and ultimately, so considering that the cos theta is the adjacent by hypotenuse, the inclined plane, the area of the inclined plane would be A by cos theta. So what you have is the area of the inclined plane is expressed as A by cos theta. Now when you want to consider the stress that is acting on this plane, then we have to consider, so we want to see or calculate what is the stress that is acting on the plane, and if you could recollect, it is the shear component of stress that brings about the plastic deformation. So therefore we express that stress as tau. Instead of sigma, we express this as tau, because if you could recollect, it is the shear component of the stress that brings about the plastic deformation. So therefore the stress that is acting with respect to the inclined plane will be the load that we impose and the area of the inclined plane. So that means this would be equal to P by A cos theta. So this means we have this P by A is sigma cos theta. So this expression here, it talks about the stress that is acting along the loading direction with respect to the area of the slip plane. So if you could consider this two-dimensional setup which we have previously treated when we are talking about, or when we introduced the components of stress, even though we translated or we consider the area of the inclined plane, the direction of the stress because of this expression here does not change. If you have the loading direction in this manner, the stress that we have calculated now with respect to the area of the inclined plane will also act in the similar direction. So therefore this stress here is also acting along the direction of P. Now we want to consider the component of the stress that is acting along the loading direction. So we know with respect to the area of the slip plane, we have this stress that is acting along the loading direction P. So along the loading direction P, with respect to the slip plane, we have the stress acting of sigma cos theta. Now we want to calculate the component of stress that is acting in this direction. So this would be nothing but sigma cos theta cos lambda. So this is the stress that is available for the dislocation or the propagation of the dislocation. So this is referred to as the result shear stress. So what we have done is we have considered a three-dimensional setup, and in that we have considered a slip plane. With respect to the slip plane, we have calculated the component of stress that is acting along the loading direction. With respect to the slip plane here, we have calculated the component of the stress, that is this one, that continues to act along the loading direction. So this we did by considering the or introducing the area of cross section of the slip plane. So this component of the stress, it acts along the loading direction. Now by projecting this component of the stress with respect to the slip plane that is acting along the loading direction onto the slip direction, we were able to calculate the stress that is available for the propagation of the dislocation. So this is referred to as the result shear stress. So there is a critically result shear stress that is required for the dislocation to move. So you need a particular amount of stress for the dislocation to move, and this is referred to as the critically resolved shear stress. So the imposed condition or the imposed stress should be in such a way that it exceeds this critically resolved shear stress in order for the dislocation to propagate. So what we have essentially arrived at is two sets of expression. One expression that just talks about the amount of stress that is available for the propagation of the dislocation. The other expression where we have considered a critical stress that we need to impose in order to introduce or in order to make the dislocation move. Now, these are just magnitude, and the term that talks about the orientation of the slip plane and the slip direction is this term here. So this term here is the magnitude of the stress that we impose on the system. It is just the ratio of the load to the cross-sectional area of the system. However, this term here, it talks about the orientation of the slip system. So what we essentially have is a term that talks about or that becomes specific for a specific crystal structure. So this values of theta and lambda vary depending on this crystal structure. So this is the term that talks or that characterizes or ensures that this particular expression is for a particular slip plane, and this term is referred to as the Schmidt factor. So whenever you are calculating the resolved shear stress that is acting on a particular slip plane and a slip direction, it is the Schmidt factor that introduces or that characterizes the slip plane. So the factor that brings about the features of the plane or the slip system into the expression is this Schmidt factor. So now, based on the imposed condition or imposed load, we are able to resolve the stress that is required for the propagation of the dislocation. Now what we have essentially found is, once you have a dislocation, the dislocation needs a specific combination of a direction and plane in order for it to move. All dislocations are not by in itself, it is mobile in nature. So you need, whenever you have a dislocation, for it to move, you need a critically resolved shear stress to be acting on it. A stress that is more than the critically resolved shear stress, and it should have an operational slip system. So whenever these conditions are not satisfied, the dislocation will not move. So such dislocations that are not mobile in nature, so it could be because of its surroundings, that is, it doesn't have a proper slip system for the dislocation to move, then such dislocations are not mobile in nature, and such dislocations are called as sessile dislocations. So sessile dislocations are the one which are not able to move because of there could be several conditions, and one of the condition is maybe there is not enough critically resolved shear stress acting on it, or maybe the surrounding is not conducive for it to move. The other dislocation which is capable of moving is, we refer to it as the sessile dislocation. So these are just terminologies that you need to understand when you are considering the theory of dislocation. So the sessile dislocation is the one which is not mobile in nature, whereas the sessile dislocation is one that is mobile in nature. Now, if you could recollect, even when we consider the mobility or the propagation of the dislocation, we referred to a specific propagation of the dislocation so far, which we referred to as the glide. So far we have been considering one specific mode of dislocation or dislocation movement which we refer to as the glide. So this glide mode of propagation of the dislocation, it is characterized by the coplanar nature of dislocation line and Burgers vector. So if you could recollect, when a dislocation moves and the dislocation line and the Burgers vector are on the same plane, then this movement of the dislocation we refer to it as the glide, and the gliding of the dislocation is what ultimately leads to the slip of the material. Now this glide, wherein you have dislocation line and the Burgers vector on the same plane, we refer to this movement as the conservative movement of dislocation. whenever a dislocation moves, and during its propagation, you have the dislocation line and the Burgers vector acting on the same plane. This set of movements is referred to as the conservative movement, and one form of the conservative movement is the glide, and the glide ultimately lead to the slip of the material. Now, there are possibilities wherein the dislocation move, but the dislocation line and the Burgers vector, they do not lie on the same plane. So, the condition wherein the dislocation line and the Burgers vector are not coplanar, we refer to that as the non-conservative moment. Now let us see where we can find, or generally where such non-conservative movements of dislocation is possible. If you could recollect, in case of a pure screw dislocation, when we constructed the Burgers circuit, in order to calculate the Burgers vector of a pure screw dislocation, we considered a path something like this. And as you can see, the path here, the Burgers vector, the circuit we consider to calculate the Burgers vector, it does not stick to a particular plane, and the plane or the Burgers vector, it moves along a set of planes. So what you essentially have is, in case of the screw dislocation, the Burgers vector is not confined to a specific plane. Even though it is possible to identify the dislocation line along a specific plane, the Burgers vector cannot be identified, and also the Burgers circuit cannot be identified or confined to a specific plane. You have the Burgers circuit transversing over a parallel sets of planes. So therefore, in case of the screw dislocation, we do not have a coplanar arrangement of the dislocation line and the Burgers vector. So the propagation of the screw dislocation, since the Burgers vector is not confined to a specific plane, as in the case of the dislocation line or the screw dislocation line, this screw dislocation, it moves through a non-conservative moment. And moreover, when we talk about the screw dislocation, it is not generally confined, or the slip plane wherein the screw dislocation propagates, it is not generally confined to one plane, but rather a family of planes. So we do not represent the slip plane of the screw dislocation as in this manner H, K and L, but rather the family of planes of H, K and L. So because of the characteristic nature of the screw dislocation, the Burgers vector is not confined to a specific plane, it transverses over a set of planes. And therefore, since the Burgers vector, which is not a coplanar with the dislocation line, in most cases the screw dislocation, it propagates through a non-conservative moment. And again, since the Burgers vector is not confined to a specific plane in case of a screw dislocation, the slip plane for a screw dislocation, it is not a specific plane, but rather an equivalent family of planes. Now, the mode of the propagation of the screw dislocation can be considered or treated in this manner. Supposing the screw dislocation moves through a family of planes and it meets a junction wherein two family of planes they meet. It comes to a junction wherein a two family of plane meets, and in that juncture, the screw dislocation, it is possible for the screw dislocation to identify a path wherein the overall energy change can be kept minimal. So it means when at the junction wherein you have two slip planes meet, the family of slip planes, particularly in case of screw dislocation, when it meets, it is possible for the dislocation to propagate along a direction wherein you have the Burgers vector or the shortest lattice translation vector. So in that plane, so supposing in this plane here, the dislocation identifies a direction wherein you have the shortest translation vector. That means the dislocation can move in this plane with the minimal energy change, then the dislocation will continue to move in this plane. So what we have is the dislocation which was propagating along a specific plane or along a family of plane is now taking a change in the plane, or considering or moving along a complete or taking a turn in the plane, even though it is within the family of plane, it is taking a turn. This is because in that new plane, that is in this new plane, it has identified a direction wherein if the dislocation moves in this direction, the overall energy being introduced into the system still remains at the minimum. So once it is able to identify such a direction, once it is able to identify such a Burgers vector in that direction, so in that case, since it is energetically favored, it does not add to any energy of the system, or it does not create any additional energy to the system, the dislocation slips in this plane as well. In addition to its existing plane, family of plane, it also moves in this plane as well. So this is what we refer to as the cross slip. So this cross slip is predominantly observed in the screw dislocation, because in the screw dislocation the Burgers vector is not confined. So the Burgers vector, when it is not confined, the dislocation, it is not confined to a specific slip plane. The slip plane, it is confined, or it moves along the family of slip planes, and this movement along the family of slip plane occurs through this cross slip. Supposing you have a loop of screw dislocation that is on a particular plane, when it propagates, when it moves and meets a juncture or reaches a juncture wherein you have its interaction with another family of plane, so another plane which is within the family of plane. So in this case, the screw dislocation is moving along the family of plane of 1, 1, 1, so it should be in the FCC case. Now this screw dislocation, the loop of the screw dislocation is propagating along the 1, 1, 1, and now it reaches a juncture wherein it interacts with this new plane which is again a part of this family of planes. So when it meets with this new plane which is the part of the family of planes and identifies a direction which has the shortest lattice translation vector, the Burgers vector of which is equal to the shortest translation vector, then it is energetically favored for that dislocation to move in this new plane, and this is what we refer to as the cross slip. Now after moving sufficiently, this interaction between the two sets of plane of a particular family of plane can happen again, and this is what we observe here, and this is what we earn in this region wherein you have one cross slip here, another cross slip here, because of the interaction of two planes that belong to same family of planes. This here is referred to as the double cross slip. So what we find is what we have seen here is the non-conservative movement of screw dislocation. So the screw dislocation, because of its very nature, it does not have a particular slip plane, but it has a family of slip planes, and therefore when it is moving along a particular plane and when it interacts with another plane which belongs to this family of plane, and it identifies a specific direction with the shortest lattice translation vector, and the Burgers vector is equal to that, then it is energetically favored for the dislocation to take that new plane, and it takes it, and it is what is referred to as the cross slip, and this can happen multiple times, and here we have seen a double cross slip. Now this is one example of the non-conservative movement which is associated with the screw dislocation. Now the other example for the non-conservative movement wherein the Burgers vector and the dislocation line are not coplanar in nature is referred to as the climb. So the climb is also an example of the non-conservative movement. So now for this discussion on the climb, let us go back to a rather representative consideration of the edge dislocation. So in this consideration, we have the extra layer of atoms that is present here. So this is the extra layer of atoms, and in this extra layer of atoms, the dislocation line is projecting towards us, and this is the atom that represents the dislocation line. So the dislocation line is projecting towards us, and the black one is the extra layer of atoms. The slip plane is this one here. So this is a case of a positive edge dislocation. Supposing the row of atoms that is projected towards us is completely removed. Supposing you have a sufficient amount of vacancies, and all these vacancies, they move into this direction, or they reach this row of atoms that is projection towards us. So the vacancies, so you have sufficient amount of vacancies that replace the dislocation line that is projecting towards us. Now you can say, since we are just talking in the terms of adding an extra row of atoms, you can also call that as removing the row of atoms that is projecting towards us. If you remove the row of atoms that is projecting towards us, what essentially happens is, if you remove this row of atoms that is projecting towards us, the slip plane then moves above. So the slip plane, with reference to which we talk about the edge dislocation, it moves up, and this is what we refer to as the climb. So climb is nothing but the extra layer of atom or extra row of atoms that characterize the dislocation line when it is removed. So this removal in the physical case is generally attributed to the migration of vacancy to that particular row of atoms. So when this row of atom is removed or replaced by vacancies, then what essentially would happen is this slip plane will move to this spot here, because this row of atom is removed and the slip plane will now occupy this particular position. So we can use the dotted blue line. So the new position of the slip plane will be this one. So that means what happens is the dislocation has moved one step up, and this is what we refer to as the climb. And this is how the climb is represented. So what you have here, and in this case you have the movement of slip plane which was earlier here and it has moved one step above. So this is referred to as the positive climb. So when you have the slip plane moving upward, we refer to it as the positive climb. And this climb, even though we can say it is just the removal of the row of atoms that is designated as A, this removal of the row of atoms will ultimately lead to the positive climb. In the physical case, it is the migration of the vacancies. So climb is generally governed by, or generally introduced in the system, when you have a sufficient amount of vacancies and these vacancies are mobile in nature. So therefore, to have a sufficient amount of vacancies and these vacancies to be highly diffusive in nature, we need to rise the temperature of the material. So therefore, this particular moment of the dislocation, the climb of the dislocation, is generally observed at high temperature. It's an high temperature phenomena, and this is nothing but, or the removal of the extra layer of atom is nothing but the moment of the dislocation. And similarly at the high temperature, it is also possible to introduce the extra layer of atoms beneath the existing dislocation line. So at high temperature, since it is energetically feasible to have interstitial atoms, these interstitial atoms can move and then occupy a position below this line here. So at high temperature, the migration of interstitial atoms will lead to the downward movement of the dislocation or the slip plane. So this is what we refer to as the negative climb. So at high temperature, it is possible for us to have a positive climb wherein the slip plane moves one step up, and also for the negative climb wherein the slip plane moves one step downwards. Now in case of the positive climb, which is here, it is because of the migration of the vacancies. However, in case of the negative climb, it is because of the migration of the interstitial atoms. So both these are possible at high temperature. So therefore, at high temperature, the positive and the negative climb add to the existing mode of movement of the dislocation. So these modes, they add to the existing modes like the cross slip and also the glide of the dislocation at high temperature, because of the increased number of vacancies and the increased number of interstitial atoms and the increased amount of diffusivity in these vacancies and the interstitial atoms. It is possible for the dislocations to move upward and downwards, or to experience positive climb and the negative climb. So at high temperature, climb adds to the existing mode of the movement. So since in the climb we have a complete shift in the plane or a complete removal of the dislocation line, these also fall under the non-conservative moment of the dislocation. Now it is very rare for the entire dislocation line or the entire row of atoms that represent the dislocation line to be removed. So far what we have considered is, we have considered the dislocation line to be projecting towards us. So dislocation line is nothing but the bottom layer or the bottom row of atoms. So this row of atom that is represented, that was represented by A, that is projecting towards us, is nothing but the dislocation line. So instead of considering that, instead of assuming the dislocation line or the row of atom is projecting towards us, let us see how or consider or view the dislocation line perpendicularly. Meaning, instead of assuming the dislocation line is pointing towards us, let us see or consider a view wherein the dislocation line is perpendicular to our view. So let us assume this is the dislocation line. So instead of a condition wherein the overall dislocation line is removed through the accumulation of vacancies is very rare. What happens often is that a section of this dislocation line is removed by the accumulation of vacancies. So if you could recollect, for the climb we assumed that, or we defined climb as the movement of the slip plane by the replacement of the existing dislocation line with vacancies or by the interstitial atom. So if you want to consider the positive climb, when the existing row of atoms that acts as the dislocation line. So this row of atoms that acts as the dislocation line, when it is completely replaced by vacancies, what you would essentially have is the positive climb, that the slip plane moves one step above and we have the positive climb. But it is very rare that the entire row of atoms that denote the dislocation line, it is being replaced by the vacancies. What happens is the section of the dislocation line or the row of atom that characterizes the dislocation line is replaced by the vacancies. So this, not the entire row of atoms, but the section of it is being replaced by the vacancies. So this is what happens physically. So if you could construct or consider this in the three-dimensional case, what you would have is something like this. You would have the extra row of atom that characterizes the dislocation line, and in that a section of this row is being lifted above by the accumulation of vacancies. So this is how we see climb physically. So the climb is not observed throughout the entire slip plane or throughout the entire dislocation, but if you consider the slip plane in this region, so if you consider the slip plane in this region, it has climbed one step above when compared to the others. So this is how physically you would observe the climb event, and the steps that render this climb event is referred to as the jogs. So jogs are the steps that are observed accompanying the climb. So here you have the jogs, and between these jogs you observe the climb of the slip plane, and this is achieved by in the section of the dislocation line. Supposing if you want to have a negative climb, then in that case the jog would be of this, or the arrangement of the dislocation line would be of this form. You would have the arrangement of the dislocation line in this form, and still the steps will be referred to as the jogs. So these steps are referred to as the jogs, and if you could see, these steps are perpendicular to that of the existing dislocation line. So if these jogs are pointing upwards, you have a positive climb in that section. Again, not for the overall dislocation line. In that section you have a positive climb, and when the jogs or the steps are downwards, you have the negative climb. So what we essentially have in the physical case is the overall dislocation does not experience a climb, but a section of it experiences a climb, and this is through these steps, and these steps are referred to as the jogs. And since these are the steps wherein the vacancies they accumulate, or the interstitial atoms they accumulate, these jogs act as the source or the sink of vacancies. They act as the sink of the vacancies when these jogs introduce a positive climb. So when the jogs introduce a positive climb, you have a setup something like this. So this is achieved by the accumulation of vacancies. So therefore, when the jogs introduce a positive climb, it means it is acting as a sink of the vacancies. Now, when you have the jogs introducing a negative climb of something like this, so that means you have introducing the interstitial atoms here. In this region, you are introducing the interstitial atoms. So that means you have formation of the vacancies elsewhere. So that means in that case, it becomes the source of vacancies. So the jogs can be source of vacancies and also sink of vacancies depending on the climb that it introduces. So this climb, it is not observed throughout the dislocation line. It is observed at a section of the dislocation, and the steps that bring about this climb event is referred to as the jogs. Similar to the jogs, which appear perpendicular to that of the dislocation line, which appear along the extra layer of atoms, there is another steps that can also appear in the dislocation line. So what jog is? The jog, it brings about the climb in the slip plane by removing the extra layer of atoms. Now it is also possible to have similar steps which extends the dislocation line along the slip plane. So in case of the jog, the slip plane is in this direction and the steps are perpendicular to the slip plane. So in case of the jog, these are the slip planes and the steps of the jogs are perpendicular to the slip plane. So the steps that are brought about by the jogs are perpendicular to the slip plane. However, it is also possible that the vacancies or the extra layer of atoms can be introduced in the dislocation line in such a way that the steps are brought on the slip plane. So in case of the jogs, the steps are perpendicular to the slip plane, and it is also possible by the accumulation of vacancies or the accumulation of the interstitial atom to have steps along the slip plane, and these steps are referred to as the kinks. So depending on the movement of vacancies or the interstitial atoms, the dislocation line can or the section of the dislocation line can change. If in the section of the dislocation line you have a climb in the extra layer of atom because of the accumulation of vacancies, so this is achieved by the steps that are perpendicular to the slip plane, and these steps are referred to as the jogs. So you have a slip plane, and in that plane you have an extra row of atoms or the row of atom that is designated as the dislocation line, and because of the movement of the vacancies, this extra row of atoms is moved a step above. So the step above is perpendicular to that of the slip plane, and this we refer to as the jogs. And it is also possible that this movement of the vacancies, instead of moving the dislocation line up, it can move it along this direction, along the slip plane, and this is what we refer to as the kinks. So the extra layer of atoms here, or the extra layer of or the extra accumulated vacancy here, or the step produced here is along the slip direction, and the step produced here is perpendicular to the slip plane. So here in case of the jog, the step is perpendicular to the slip plane, here it is along the slip plane. So these are the different steps that one can observe, or different abnormalities that one can observe along the dislocation line. In case of jogs, this leads to the positive or negative climb. In case of kinks, it just changes the nature of the dislocation line within the slip plane. Now let us consider how these jogs and kinks affect the mobility of the dislocation. Now since the kinks. It is nothing but an extra projection in the dislocation line, or a section that is being removed in the dislocation line along the slip plane. The kinks, they never impede. These kinks, they never impede the movement of any dislocation, so be it edge dislocation or be it screw dislocation. Since these kinks are nothing but an extra layer of atoms or an extra removal of the atoms from the dislocation line along the slip plane, these do not impede the movement of the dislocation in any manner whatsoever. However, these jocks, since these are perpendicular to that of the slip plane, they do not, even though they do not impede the movement of the edge dislocation, since the screw dislocation is not confined to a specific plane, and this jocks introduces a step in the specific plane. The screw dislocation, if you could recollect, is not confined to a specific plane, but since the jock, it is confined to a specific plane, it acts as a barrier for the movement of screw dislocation. So what we have is the kinks, which is the extra layer of atoms or the extra accumulation of vacancies in along the slip plane. It never impedes any dislocation. The jocks, wherein you have a step that is being introduced perpendicular to the slip plane, it does not impede the pure edge dislocation. However, since the screw dislocation is not confined to a specific plane, and these jocks here are confined to a specific plane and that they are perpendicular to a specific slip plane, these jocks in the screw dislocation, acts as the barrier for the movement of the screw dislocation. So far what we have considered is the different movements of the dislocations and the stress that is required for causing the movement of the dislocation. The stress that is required, or the stress that needs to be above a specific value, that specific value we refer to as the critically resolved shear stress. We considered it by considering a three-dimensional setup, a conventional one that we have so far considered when we have treated the components of stresses. And by starting with that, we introduce different terminologies: sessile dislocation, glacial dislocation, and we have considered the conservative and the non-conservative movement. And in case of the non-conservative moment, we saw that is one that is associated with the screw dislocation, that is the cross slip, and there is multiple cross slips that are possible. So in our case, we just saw a single cross slip and a double cross slip. This is primarily because of the nature of the screw dislocation. It is not confined to a specific plane, it is confined to rather a family of planes. And when you have an interaction between two planes that belongs to the family of planes, and it is possible for the dislocation to identify a direction with shortest translation vector, then the dislocation is allowed to slip from one plane to another. In these two planes, they belong to a family of planes. So this is one form of the non-conservative movement. And in addition to that, we saw positive and the negative climb that is introduced in the pure edge dislocation. And the positive climb is nothing but the removal of the extra layer of atoms or the extra row of atoms that indicate the dislocation line. So the row of atom is being removed, that indicates the dislocation line, that and appears that the dislocation has moved one step upward. This is referred to as the positive climb. And by introducing an extra row of atoms, it appears as though the dislocation has moved downwards. This is the negative climb. So these are achieved by the accumulation of vacancies or the interstitial atoms, and since these are abundantly available at high temperature, the climb, the event of climb is it is observed at the high temperature. So this is one additional movement of the dislocation at the high temperature. Now this removal of the atoms or the introduction of the vacancies or introduction of the interstitial that does not occur uniformly all through the dislocation line. It occurs at specific sections, and these specific sections wherein the climb is observed in the form of the step, these are referred to as the jocks. So it is the steps that introduces or that characterizes the climb, and these steps are referred to as the jocks. So the positive in case of the positive climb, the section which experiences the positive climb, the jocks point upwards, and the section that experiences the negative climb, the jocks point downwards. So these jogs are perpendicular to the slip plane, and it is also possible to have such steps along the slip plane, and those are referred to as the kinks. So the jogs, they do not, the kinks rather, which are found along the slip plane, they do not impede any dislocation, be it edge dislocation, be it screw dislocation. It do not impede any dislocation. However, the jogs, they impede the screw dislocation because of its nature, because it is not confined to a specific plane. However, the jogs are confined to a specific plane, and that plane is perpendicular to the slip plane. They affect the mobility, or they impede the movement of the screw dislocation. However, they do not impede the movement of the edge dislocation. So in this lecture, we have so far considered the movement of the dislocations. Now in the next lecture, we will try to take a step back and relate the dislocation to the slip and consider the different origins of slip. So what are the factors that governs the slip, and from that we will also take a step back and consider how one can relate the strain, the plastic strain that we observe macroscopically to that of the dislocation. So that is what we will be doing in the last lecture, possibly the last lecture of the dislocation. We will try to consider or relate the dislocation to the overall plastic deformation, and we will see what are the factors that govern the plastic deformation in terms of the dislocation. So let's see ourselves in the next lecture, wherein we will attempt to relate the dislocation to the plastic deformation as a whole. Goodbye.